Death and Taxes looked like a cool game. You're the Grim Reaper and get to choose who lives and dies based on specific instructions given to you by upper management. Obviously the game would be boring if there wasn't more to it, so I was sure that there would be multiple subplots presented to us. In many ways this game reminded me of Papers, Please, in which we played a bureaucrat who works at the border between two countries. His was a communist dictatorship of some sorts, so the rules to enter were very strict and our job was to control everyone's documents and decide who we let in and who we reject. So in a way, Death and Taxes and Papers, Please are very similar. But as is tradition on this channel, let's talk about the Ultrawide Support first. This one is a mix between yes and no. The game generally supports ultrawide natively, but most screens are pre-drawn and the drawings are designed for 1080p, so on those screens you will have black bars on the sides. I guess this is still better than no support at all. I will be comparing Death and Taxes to Papers, Please a lot in this review, not only because they are very similar as we've already discussed, but also because Papers, Please was there first, yet remains the superior game in every way. Yeah, that's kind of a spoiler for the whole review. But first, let's look at the story. As usual, I will keep the review spoiler free, so you don't have to worry about that. The story of Death and Taxes is presented to us through voice-acted conversations with several NPCs, as well as through the profiles of the people who we doom or let live. Our day starts. We suddenly get a bunch of profiles with short descriptions of our potential victims, as well as instructions from our boss. Now we decide how we wish to play this out. The problem here is that at first, we as the player are not even sure what the game really wants us to do. As a Grim Reaper who is literally created to do this job by our boss, it's pretty clear what we should do, but as a player we wonder if there are more options. The problem is that the consequences of our actions are largely invisible to us. Yes, we have a phone which allows us to browse social media and news, which indicates some of the changes that happen on Earth based on our decisions, but it's way too abstract and minimalistic. Doing something outside of what was instructed simply leads to not getting paid for the day. The money, however, is barely needed as there are very few useful items available to buy. Most of them are cosmetic stuff which we pretty much never really even get to see, making it pointless. In Papers, Please, we often got to see the consequences of our actions directly. Let's not forget that there we have a family to feed, so we really need the little amounts of money that we get from our job every day. In addition to that, we meet the people whose papers we're processing in person. Some of them even beg us to help them. This makes it harder to reject someone who desperately needs to enter the country just because of some minor bureaucratic condition which they aren't really meeting. At the same time, being caught will result in no payment or worse. Our family will starve, etc. As you can probably see, the stakes are higher and the presentation is superior in Papers, Please. In terms of gameplay, Death and Taxes also lags behind. Here we have to read profiles and assess which ones correspond to the instructions we have received on that day. In addition to that, every person's life or death will have an effect on society, so you have to consider that as well. After all, this is one of the factors which determine which endings you will receive. The problem is that while some profiles are logical and therefore lead to sensible consequences, others tend to be completely neutral in their description and the consequences of those appear to be completely random. This is bad because luck is simply not what I want to factor into my evaluation when I make a decision in a game. In addition to that, the rules of the game remain pretty much the same. The only exception is during the 1 or 2 times when the game asks you to assist the plant department. That's when you get to decide the fate of some plants. The game is also tackling the subject of death, but doesn't have the balls to do it properly. There simply aren't any tough choices whatsoever. Not only because you never get to interact with your victims, or even really see them, but also because you only get adult males or females. Oh sorry, in fact, it's not even men or women, since the game keeps referring to everyone as they. After all, it is 2022 and we have to be careful with those pronouns, right? So the game is politically correct and will not let you decide the fate of anyone who would create a proper moral dilemma. No children, no pregnant women, no people with disabilities, etc. Literally any aspect of this game which would have made things interesting from a moral or philosophical standpoint has been removed. In addition to that, the game gives us the option to talk to people at the bar and also order drinks, which we have to pay for with our hard-earned cash. The voice acting is generally okay and definitely adds to the atmosphere, but the problem is that it is all completely inconsequential. You can talk to them or not, it really doesn't matter or change anything. You might get a bit of story exposition, but mostly you will get to listen to pointless nonsense. Your interactions with these characters will be limited to that bar as well. You never get to interact with them outside the bar. This is generally the game's main issue. It feels very on rails, and most of the things you do will be pointless and yet again inconsequential. The story is weak, the gameplay mediocre, and without any of the moral dilemmas, there barely is any substance to it whatsoever. It's a game which could have been so much more, but sadly isn't, and that's at least in part due to the developer's fear of implementing it properly and tackling some sensitive topics. And let's not forget the political correctness, which serves as another layer of annoyance for me. I know I have been bashing this game mercilessly, but it certainly deserves it. I played through it twice, got the worst and best endings, and have to admit that it did provide some minor entertainment. But is it worth the current price of €12? I'd personally say no. It's a mediocre game at best, the stakes are low, and each consecutive playthrough ended up exposing more and more of its flaws. I'd say if you find it on offer under $10, you could give it a shot. So, should you play Death and Taxes? Well, probably not, like I said, especially not if the price hasn't dropped. Get Papers, Please instead. It's the far superior game, and if you have played that one already and crave more bureaucratic adventures, then I guess you could give this a try. With that having been said, I want to thank you for watching Game Filter. Naturally, it would warm my heart if you gave some of my other videos a look or two, and I hope to see you on the next one. Until then, this is Nino signing off. Have a great day.